Today, we're tackling a really big question, one that gets right to the heart of India's democracy. Is its parliament actually in decline? We're going to dive deep and break down what's really going on.
So let's just get right down to it. Is India's parliament, the very foundation of its democracy, losing its punch? This isn't just some abstract political debate. There's growing evidence that suggests there are some very real problems we need to talk about.
But before we can really get into what's going wrong, we've got to go back to the beginning. We need to understand the original blueprint. Why did India's founders pick this exact system of government in the first place?
So India has what's called a parliamentary government. What does that actually mean? Well, it means the government, the executive, isn't some separate entity. It's drawn from the legislature and has to answer to the legislature. That direct line of accountability back to the people's representatives, that's the whole point.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The founders had a major choice to make. They could have gone for a system with more stability, like a presidential system where the leader has a fixed term. But they didn't. They chose accountability, daily, constant accountability, over that kind of stability. They gave Parliament the power to question, to challenge, and even to bring down the government. And that one decision pretty much shapes everything we're about to discuss.
All right, so we've got the blueprint. Now let's look at the cracks in the foundation. What are the visible symptoms, the red flags, that tell us this democratic engine isn't running as smoothly as it should?
One of the first big issues really comes down to a simple question. Who's actually in the room where these laws are being made? See, for a legislature to be effective, it's got to look and sound like the people it represents. If it doesn't, the laws it makes can feel totally out of touch with reality.
Just look at this number. After the 2019 general elections, a mere 14.4% of the elected MPs were women. I mean, think about that. In a country where women are literally half the population, that is a huge representation gap at the highest level of power.
Okay, so it's not just about who's in the room, but also what's their track record. Because public trust, that's really the bedrock of democracy, right? And there's a real concern that this trust is eroding.
Okay, get ready for this one. Let this number just sink in for a second. After the 2024 general elections, almost a third, 29%, of the newly elected MPs had criminal cases pending against them. This isn't just a statistic on a slide. It makes you ask some really tough questions about who we're sending to write our laws.
And it's not just about who the members are, it's about what they're doing, or more often what they're not doing. Parliamentary sessions seem to be more about disruption than debate these days. This quote from the 2024 monsoon session says it all. Constant adjournments don't just slow things down, they bring the whole legislative process to a grinding halt.
Okay, so we've seen the symptoms, the fever, the cough. Now it's time to play doctor and figure out the actual disease. What are the deep-seated root causes behind this decline?
First up, we've got what you could call procedural failures. This is when the basic rules of the game, the actual nuts and bolts of how Parliament is supposed to function, just start to fall apart.
And you see this in a bunch of different ways. We're seeing laws get rushed through without any real substantive debate. The committee system, which is supposed to be where the deep dive analysis happens, keeps getting bypassed. Agendas are so jam-packed that nothing gets the attention it deserves. And sometimes there aren't even enough MPs in the room to legally hold a session.
And if you want a perfect textbook example of this, look no further than the Farm Laws Repeal Bill back in 2021. This was a massive, country-changing piece of legislation, and yet it was pushed through with barely any discussion, completely sidestepping the detailed scrutiny it desperately needed.
All right, let's dig a little deeper now, beyond just the day-to-day procedures. The next set of challenges are political and structural. We're talking about problems that are baked right into the laws and the political culture itself.
A classic case is the Anti-Defection Law. Now, on paper, it sounds like a good idea, right? It was meant to stop politicians from jumping ship for personal gain. But, and this is a huge but, the unintended consequence has been massive. It's effectively silenced individual MPs, forcing them to just vote the party line or risk getting kicked out. That's a debate killer. And that brings us to the final core challenge. And it's a big one. What's known as executive dominance. This is what happens when the government itself, the executive branch, starts to act like it's above the legislature, finding ways to just go around it. So how does it do that? Well, one of its main tools is the ordinance. An ordinance is basically a temporary law that the government can pass all by itself, no debate, no vote in Parliament needed.
When these are used frequently, like we saw with the original farm laws, it becomes a massive shortcut that completely sidesteps the democratic process.
So after all that doom and gloom, you're probably asking, okay, so what do we do about it? Well, let's switch gears and talk about some of the potential solutions for strengthening this vital institution.
So what does the roadmap for reform look like? Well, it's pretty clear. First, you have to tackle the disruptions so work can actually get done. Second, you need to carve out more time for genuine quality debate. Third, you've got to beef up the committee system so it can do its job of detailed scrutiny. And finally, and this is crucial, you have to put a check on the government's power to make laws by itself through ordinances.
And let's be really, really clear about what's at stake here. This isn't just some academic debate. Restoring the legislature, making it effective and accountable again, that's absolutely fundamental to the long-term health of India's democracy itself. Full stop.
Which brings us to our final thought, and it's really a question for you. We've talked about the problems and the potential fixes inside the system, but what about the rest of us? What is our role as citizens in demanding a parliament that actually works for us? Now that's something worth thinking about.